Good morning to everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar this morning on mandates. Nico Maria, who is one of the SIA board members, will be taking us through some information regarding mandates. So he sits on the Governance, Compliance and Discipline Committee. And today is just going to be an interactive talk session where he's just going to give us some information and facts and points on mandates. So I'm going to hand over to Nico. Morning, Nico.
Good morning from a very, very wet Free State. Good morning. I see there are quite a few auctioneers online this morning. Yes, as Sonia said, it's not going to be a long webinar, so you can start with your weekends, but I think it's important what I have to say, and I would also like to hear what you've got to say. I think what we're going to do, just for the sake of so basically feedback is important, and it's important that you guys that are in the field working every single day, that you also come back to us with scenarios and with feedback with regard to mandates. I don't want to go into too much detail with regard to the court cases. I don't know if you can see me. I don't know if my camera is working. Is it working, Sonia?
No.
Unfortunately, my camera doesn't seem to work, so you're going to have to listen to me. In any case, I have got a face that's rather made for radio than television, so I'll spare you that this morning. So let's just kick off. To understanding mandates is how, and I've got notes. The notes I'm not putting up today, but I will have them available if anyone wants them afterwards. I will have them typed and ready for you. So if you need those notes. Understanding mandates is where we start. It's very important, I think, for each of us as a designation property practitioner auctioneer to understand mandates. And the basic definition of a mandate in the context of the South African Property Practitioners Act and perspective, as per the definition set out in section 123 of the PPA. They say mandate means an instruction or an authorization given to and accepted by a property practitioner to render a service. Now, you all knew this was an instruction. I mean, it's obvious. But that definition in itself needs to be expanded, because there's much more to it. And if you don't expand it, I think you may land in hot water, especially if you dealing with a mandate as property practitioner designation auctioneer, whilst you have other mandates in terms of the Property Practitioners Act. I know that the Property Practitioners Act does have a pro forma mandate that they've given out, and it's important to also look at that. But understanding mandates as a whole is of utmost importance, because in 100% of the cases of dispute, the proof of the legality of the agreement will be dependent on a mandate and the content of that mandate, which will go a long way to assist you with the burden of proof, especially where commissions and terms are in dispute. So you all know that the content of the mandate is of utmost importance, especially your percentage commission, your mandate period. Is it an open mandate? Is it a joint mandate? Is it a sole mandate? Is it a sole and exclusive mandate? What type of mandate are you dealing with? But it's also especially important to understand that a mandate is a contract. And those that don't know that, it's a contract which is a binding contract where mutual obligations come into existence, which set out the parameters of function and obligations by the different contracting parties, i.e. to sell your property, selling the property and getting paid commission at certain percentage within a certain period of time. But it goes further than that as well, because you have to go and differentiate where you are going with your mandate and where you're getting your mandate from. Also, I would go further to say a mandate. Someone's mic is on in the background. Sonia? Can I just ask?
I can hear that. Can I just ask that everybody mute themselves, please? I'm just checking which mic it is. I'm trying to see and
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you. Can I continue?
Yes, thank you, Nico.
Okay, so also, I also have come to the conclusion, if you go look at all the court cases that I've read through, and I'll get to them now, but I'm not going to go into detail of every single one. A mandate is also of paramount importance to a seller, and it's for obvious reasons, because a mandate creates certainty and protection to the agreed terms of engagement. That gives the seller certainty, and it also gives them certainty with regard to the possibility of certain liabilities and the mitigation of risks pertaining to the agreement, to possible double commissions in the event of joint mandates, which sellers and property practitioners will want to avoid at all costs, for clear reasons, because you don't want to be involved in litigation, which is time consuming and very expensive, and you don't get paid. So you want to make sure that the mandate is set up in such a way that you don't sit with that problem. It's also important, I think, to note that even though the Property Practitioners Act does allow for oral or verbal mandates in the event of open mandates, when it comes to property practitioners' real estate, I think it was very well summed up by Samuel Goldwyn, who humorously put it as follows. He says, a verbal contract isn't worth the paper it's written on. And the problem with a verbal contract is that we have a human tendency to hear only what we want to hear, and the parties to any verbal agreement can quite generally each remember the terms of the agreement quite differently. So they remember it like they want to, or even worse, if one party is determined to cheat the other, it's a lot easier to challenge a verbal agreement than a written one. So a written agreement would be the way to go in just about all the cases. But luckily, we as auctioneers, property practitioners, we shouldn't have this problem, because we all know that it's obligatory to have a written mandate, and therefore we make use of a mandate to create a position of certainty for all parties. And I think that's important to sellers out there, and it also cements our position as property practitioners in the segment to sellers and buyers alike, because we have mandates, and we have written mandates, and we have to have those written mandates because we know what the law says. So I think you now understand that it's important to differentiate between the different types of mandate, but also to differentiate between the mandates for the different designations. So you'll get a mandate in terms of the Property Practitioners Act as a property practitioner real estate, but you also get a mandate in terms of Regulation 22 of the Consumer Protection Act. Because as most of you should know by now, the Property Practitioner Act is applicable to 12 different designations. And for each designation, they have to have a Fidelity Fund certificate, and Fidelity Fund certificates are issued for each designation. Estate agents, auctioneers, bond and bridging originators, developers, HRAs, property advertising platforms. The list goes on. It's 12 different designations. Attorneys are also included there. In other words, what I'm saying is real estate agents, property practitioners with an FFC for real estate cannot sell property by means of auction, and auctioneers with an FFC for property practitioners, auctioneers may not sell property out of hand. However, it is possible to hold 2 or 3 or even 12 different FFCs. So it's important that we differentiate when it comes to mandates. The problem, however, or the conundrum that we sit with as auctioneers that we face is to ensure that in the event of overlap of the different laws, that we are covered. And I'd like to make out a strong case that our mandate in terms of Regulation 22, there's a lot of overlap with regard to sole mandates, but I'll get to that now. As auctioneers, when we are selling movable or immovable property, the Consumer Protection Act is applicable. The Consumer Protection Act was promulgated long before the Property Practitioners Act on 24th of April 2009, I think it was. And the Property Practitioners Act is clear instructions to what an auctioneer's mandate should contain. And it also has a clear instruction of the minimum requirements that are set out, which you all by now should know. And there's no reason why, but it's important to also note that there's no reason why we as auctioneers cannot expand our mandate to ensure that we have further protection to both to ourselves as auctioneers, sellers, and to the sellers and to the buyers alike. So I think it's very important to understand that yes, there are minimum requirements, but at the end of the day, we need to also look how do we expand that to protect ourselves. So recently, what happened? A situation arose, and that's why I think this webinars, and I'm just going to concentrate on this. There are many more other aspects that we also can look at, and I'll just discuss that shortly right at the end. But a recent situation arose where, and I'm not going to name any names or anything, but no background, no backdrop, where the auctioneer received a instruction to sell immovable property. The instruction came from a BRP, from a business rescue practitioner, but unbeknown to the practitioner, prior to the business going under business rescue, a sole mandate had already been issued or given by the directors of the company to a certain agent to sell the immovable property. Now, this was a sole mandate, sole exclusive mandate, which effectively this agent had already been working on, did a lot of work on, and so forth. So the auctioneers obviously got the instruction, they received the instruction, they set up their normal Regulation 22 mandate, and they went to auction upon being instructed to do so. After all the blocks were ticked, and the property was sold at auction, only to be made aware afterwards that a sole mandate had been granted to an estate agent who then laid claim to the commission. But before I go on to this, let's first stand still with the definition of a sole mandate and the possible consequences of breach or cancellation of a sole mandate. So it's important to understand what a sole or exclusive mandate is, and just to maybe just say that the different mandates in terms of the Property Practitioners Act is the open mandate, which can be in writing, should be in writing, but it can be verbal. It would be stupid for a property practitioner, real estate, to do it. And some of you hold two FFCs. You hold the FFC for property practitioner real estate, but you also hold a FFC for property practitioner auctioneer, like me. I'm one of them. So it's important to understand both of those concepts. But as auctioneers here today, it's important for us to also understand what a sole mandate is in terms of the Property Practitioners Act. And yes, it is what it is. But at the end of the day, we have to understand that that legal agreement, which is known as a sole mandate between the property owner who wishes to sell his or her property and the property practitioner estate agent, or for that matter, the property practitioner auctioneer or agency or auction house, have contracted to market and to sell it on their behalf. And this legal contract is very binding, and it typically includes a whole lot of factors like that it has to be in writing, which is much of a muchness when it's compared to the Regulation 22. It must also be signed by the seller, although it can be signed in terms of the new Electronic Transactions Act and Communication. Well, it's not new; it's 2002, so it can be signed electronically as well. A sole mandate must also include an expiry date. The norm usually is about 90 days. But that's not cast in stone. It must provide for an option to extend the period during which the agent has exclusive rights to market the property. But you must also take into consideration that the CPA, the Consumer Protection Act, does say very clearly that a sole mandate may not be longer for 24 months in total. So that's something just to bear in mind. If a mandate is extended, it must also be in writing, but that extension can't be longer than 24 months. So 24 months must be the total amount, and if it goes longer than that, then it's not regarded, it's going to be illegal. So it's important just to also, and why I say this is because it can be quite a long period for someone to hold a sole mandate. So it's important, when we get to what I'm going to say now, you'll understand where I'm going with this. It must also allow the agent the option to continue marketing the property, i.e. to render the same service going on when the sole mandate effectively expires. It does actually have, it can also take, and also from the court cases that have taken place, that I've read, this is also a very important point. It must state the commission or the fees that the estate agent will earn if they, in the event that they do sell the property. And then also very important and this is also very important because you'll see why it also fits in. It's important that once it's been signed, both the parties or all the parties involved, that the seller must actually literally receive a copy of the contract, whether it be by email or a hard copy, but he has to have a copy that is given to him. So all of the above can and should be taken into account when the Regulation 22 mandate is compiled by us as auctioneers. Even if it's in the back of your head, but it all must be taken into account. Another important aspect which should be included in your Regulation 22 mandate is a clause or clauses which address the issue of possible pre-existing sole mandates. So this is the point that I want to make to us as auctioneers, property practitioners, auctioneers. I think it's of incredible importance that we, even though that there are minimum requirements, that we as auctioneers bring a new clause into our Regulation 22 mandate. Some of you may have done this. I don't know. I haven't seen it. And the whole purpose of today's webinar is to concentrate on this. So I think it's very, very important to bring another clause into the Regulation 22 mandate. A clause which reads something like this. You guys can obviously expand on this and you can change it, but something to the effect that the seller you bring it in as one of the points in your mandate, saying seller, by signing this mandate, Regulation 22 mandate, confirms and acknowledges that he or she or the company, trust, or organization seller has no pre-existing sole mandates with any property practitioner. And you can expand that by saying sellers hereby confirm that no existing sole mandates are applicable or in force at this time, and in the event of a sole mandate existing, the seller exonerates the auctioneer, property practitioner, and will be liable in the event of possible double commission. Can you understand why that's important? So what these clauses or clauses like this effectively do is it makes a definite point and makes it pertinent for the seller and the auctioneer to discuss it, as it forces the seller, because he's obviously going to canvass this point with you when he reads in his mandate. He says, "Oh my goodness, do I have a sole mandate? Have I given a sole mandate? Have I given anyone a mandate?" And this also gives the auctioneer the possibility to also he'll also discuss it with the seller, obviously, because this point will be canvassed. And it also obviously points to the danger of possible double commission, which no seller wants to pay. And at the same time, it also strengthens the auctioneer's position, and that's very important. And I'd actually like to move to state that we bring this into our rules going forward at SAIA, that clauses like these should be mandatory clauses, that we actually bring them in. And I think, but now here's the kicker for us as auctioneers. I think if it should be established. Now you've canvassed this with the seller, and now you establish with him that there is a pre-existing sole mandate. It does exist. You as the auctioneer, or we as auctioneers, we're all in the same camp, should now be in the position to advise your prospective new client. You're going to blow his socks off to give him this information, to tell him, listen, it's not the end of the world. You've got a pre-existing sole mandate, but now we've canvassed it. I'm going to be saving you a lot of money here, and this guy is going to be listening to you, because now you can advise him. Because depending on when the pre-existing sole mandate was signed, remember now, all direct marketing agreements in terms of this Consumer Protection Act are subject to a 5-day cooling off period. So let's say he came to you that he's now tired of the sole mandate story. It's not going anywhere for him. He's come to you as auctioneer, and you ask him, sir, have you got you're obviously discussing the mandate. Have you got a pre-existing sole mandate? He says yes. He said, you ask him, when was it signed? He says, no, I signed it 2 days ago. Then immediately he can cancel that without any negative legal ramifications. So that's the first point. So, but in the event that there is a situation where the cooling off period has gone by, and it's longer than 5 days, then you still can advise your seller to say, look, in terms of the CPA, you can also, if you're not happy with the sole mandate, you can also give a 20-day notice period. So now you advise your prospective client and seller to write a letter to this property practitioner real estate, and you advising, you say, sir, unfortunately, I'm going to cancel I'm giving you a 20-day notice. I'm canceling your sole mandate because I'm going to auction with this property. Your sole mandate hasn't worked for me. There are obviously also other, and now you obviously now saved your seller a possible double commission, and you've obviously instilled newfound faith in him in the property sector into him or her as a consumer. So it's important to understand that those have been canvassed and you brought it in there. So bearing in mind that a sale mandate can also be cancelled in terms of if a property practitioner has not met their obligations in terms of the agreement. For instance, by not doing their job or not marketing the property or not abiding by any ethical codes or standards. It also goes without saying that a complaint can be lodged with the property practitioner's regulatory authority. Not that one wants to go that route, but if the property practitioner hasn't done his job in terms of so that's a very easy way to get out of it, because no one wants a complaint. And those complaints can come against an auctioneer too, so bear in mind. So, but the seller has a remedy to do that and to climb out of a sole mandate in that way too. So now you ask yourself what happened with the earlier scenario that I mentioned with the business rescue practitioner. Well, the simple answer is the matter was settled inter partes. But had the Regulation 22 mandate had that mandate have a clause which was included referring to previous mandates, the situation would have been canvassed and solved timelessly, and no one would have had to give money away. So it's absolutely of absolute paramount importance. There are a whole lot of other questions that came up in my mind, which I think I've answered to myself, but auction being a different way of selling as opposed to a property practitioner real estate, having show houses. The fact of the matter is a sole mandate, pre-existing sole mandate, effectively is legally binding, and one has to make sure that you do look at it and that you do canvass it within the parameters of your Regulation 22. Last but not least, whilst I was doing this and reading through the court cases, and the possible court the cases that I read, I'm just going to go through them very quickly. Is even as early as 1948, there was an appeal court case of Wibranchek versus Jacobs, and I'll give you all those notes. And then there was a court case in 90 which specifically dealt with joint mandates. And then there was a court case with Minutes versus Steers Trust Limited 1993, which was the effective cause of sale. And then later on, 1996, Grobler versus Winterhoek Estates. And then the very famous Wakefield Real Estate Limited versus Attree, which was a 2011, and which was also, and in that court case, they referred to Basil Elk versus Curson, which was the estate agent's efforts and the causa concernens. But all these court cases that I read, all of them, and I've actually summed it up for the guys that are interested in it. All of them had three things that the judge looked at. First of all, they looked if the property practitioner had a valid FFC. That was the first thing. If he had had an FFC and a FFC number and he was up to date, that hurdle was. The second thing, which was incredibly important, was the mandate. Whether was it a joint mandate, was it a sole mandate, was it an open mandate? What was the mandate, and what were the terms of the mandate? And that's why I said earlier, it's important for us as auctioneers to understand, yes, the Regulation 22 does give us, but we can expand the mandate to include things like canvassing of pre-existing sole mandates. As long as whatever you incorporate into your Regulation 22 is not unreasonable or unfair, you should be able to put anything in there to protect yourself. Then the latest court case, I just want to quickly go look if I can find it here on my telephone. The latest court case was a court case which was City, and you guys can maybe just have a look at this court case. It's very, very interesting to read this because a lot of information in there City and Atlantic Real Estate CC trading as Remax Living versus Smith and others, which was court case 7118 of 2023. It was heard in 2024. The court case number is 2023, but it was heard in December 2024. So it was the other day, the other day in the High Court in Cape Town. And it was with regard to joint mandates with 2 agents. Now, I will tell you that I haven't read a lot about where there are overlap or disputes with regard to property practitioners, real estate, and property practitioners, auctioneers. But I hope and I trust this doesn't happen shortly. But we need to arm ourselves as auctioneers to understand that we are going to be going into that realm now because of the new Property Practitioners Act and the overlap that's taking place. So it's important for us as SIRE, as board members of SIRE, as well as members of SIRE, to ensure that we as auctioneers don't get embroiled in litigation due to the fact that we aren't up to speed with regard to mandates. And I mean, I always say everything begins and ends with mandates. Now, in this specific case, there were 2 agents. First agent was the one that introduced the buyer to the property. And then after that, negotiations broke off. The sellers then later on accepted an offer from a buyer through a second agent, but it was the same buyer. The first agent remained the effective cause of sale because they were the ones that introduced. Now the whole scenario is set out, the whole story is set out in this court case. But the sellers accepted the offer knowing they knew that the first agent had introduced the buyer to the property on multiple occasions. And the dominant cause of sale that the court found was the efforts of the first agent and not the second agent. So the sellers were ordered to pay the first agent the commission, and the sellers and the other agent, the third agent which sell it, had to pay the cost of this whole court case, which was a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of rands, because this thing went on in the High Court. So you don't want to be in that position. So it's important that one understands that your mandate has to be brought up to speed and has to be in place so that you don't. I said lastly, but not least, it also makes sense. I see that some of the guys, I don't want to pick on anyone, but I see that, I don't know why I've got this, but I think it was Oh Yes Auctions, and I'm mentioning their name because I see that they did it, and I think that's very good and clever, is that they included their mandatory disclosure form. They included the mandatory disclosure form at the outset with the signing of the mandate, thereby eliminating any possible liabilities in the future, because we all know, and yes, we are still busy with the exoneration with regard to auctioneers. That should be in place shortly. That no contract, no OTP, no agreement of sale it has any power unless there's a mandatory disclosure form that's also signed. So if you do that right in the beginning when you're selling a movable property, say, here's your mandate, sir or madam, or whoever you're dealing with. Here's your mandate. You discuss everything, and then you say, but yeah, we've also got a mandatory disclosure form, which is mandatory in terms of the Property Practitioners Act. Please have a look at this. Are there any problems with the house? Are there any problems with the roof? Blah blah blah. You go through the whole tick list, and you've signed it, and you attach it to your mandate, and that is then dealt with, and you will never have to worry about. Then you can go ahead and sign your agreement and just attach your mandatory disclosure form. Yeah, that is in short what I wanted to convey to you today. I hope I managed to get the point across. There are a whole lot of other things, but I think the golden thread when it comes to the court deciding who must get the commission, it's important to understand that they look at the FFCs, they look at the mandates, and they look at the effective cause, and they effectively look at what effort a property practitioner, auctioneer, property practitioner, real estate agent has done. And that effort will equate to the fact that you get paid your commission or not. It may happen in the future that you have an auction. You have a sole. Oh yes. One last thing. The difference between a sole mandate. I don't know if anyone knows this, but some of you may. I know there are clever guys out there, and an exclusive mandate is that a sole mandate, the seller can also still basically market his own property and still sell. But with an exclusive mandate, and that's what I would suggest in the future, because what is a Regulation 22? It should be a sole exclusive mandate, and I would urge each auctioneer out there to actually bring that in to say that this is a sole exclusive mandate. Why do I say this? Because there's a hell of a lot of work that goes into setting up an auction, a hell of a lot of work going into marketing of an auction, a hell of a lot of work going into effectively getting an auction up and running with your people up and down. A lot of costs which aren't always taken into account. And now this guy comes and he just stops your auction. So you need to make sure that those clauses, sole exclusive mandate, on there. With an exclusive mandate, the seller is not allowed to market. Well, he can do it, but he won't be able to do it without having to pay you a commission. So I would say the sole exclusive mandate should be part of it, and we should bring that clause into the sphere. There's one last thing which I'm going to mention. Obiter, I've seen that one of our auctioneers in Sire, I'm not mentioning any names, and it's just something that I want to discuss in the future. Just remind me about this, Sonia, is the question of marketing where you are basically advertising spotter fees. I know that the PPRA have come back to me with regard to that and saying that it is allowed, but you are basically walking on dangerous ground. And I know this is going to end up in court sooner or later, because the problem is they qualify it by saying, and this is also goes down to your mandate, because it comes back to mandate. They qualify by saying it's allowed, but if you're a spotter, and what you're going to get is you're going to get people that are going to see they've made money out of this, and then they're going to become spotters, and effectively they will then have to be registered as have a registered FFC, because they are then dealing with property. They say, yeah, it's allowed, but they're not allowed to speak to the people about the properties. And I can guarantee you it's very difficult to do what they want to do without actually doing that. So that's something I just want to discuss in the future. I know it doesn't pertain to mandates per se, but it's something I just want you guys to take cognizance of. I'm sure that there might be any questions. I don't know if there are any questions right now, but I would strongly suggest. I see there's a hand up from Jackie Pinar. Jackie, I don't know if you want to ask the question now, if you want to send a mail and we can answer it that way. It's up to you, Sonia. Thank you. That is all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico. Yes, I think let's allow a few minutes Q&A if you that. So, Jackie, I have enabled it. So, Jackie, you can just unmute yourself and ask.
Thanks, Sonia. Nico, so you've got to sell an exclusive mandate, and the seller decides, or an agent takes the opportunity to go and sell the property before the auction date actually. Must there be a specific clause in what the seller will be charged with or in for, or is the exclusive mandate clear enough to say it will be a commission thing?
It will be, in terms of the court cases that I read, it will be the commission. If it's a sole exclusive, in terms of all the court cases I read, it will be the commission. And some of those court cases, there was a whole period of time where another guy came And the court, even in that instance, said, because of your sole exclusive mandate, the full commission goes to that. So I have very little doubt that that is where that we will get your full commission.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And just on your second topics, what you asked for about the FFC on spotters fee, we've implemented that a spotter must have an FFC because actually it comes in at mandate stage already. Because they obviously brought that bar and they spoke to
Correct. That's why.
Yeah, and I know it's a very tight spot. So we're quite clear that the spotter must provide us with all the FICA and FFC. And I think it just protects us in the end when a complaint or audit or something comes.
Jackie, I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. Look, I think it's a brilliant initiative. I think one must also just be careful that you don't undercut yourself as an auctioneer, when it comes to your fees. It's happening out there, but all I'm saying is that sooner or later, I think it is dangerous ground. I did canvass this with Jan Leroux, and the guys we'll get a legal opinion on this. But the PPRA are very quick to say no, it's not a problem. You can do that. But as soon as you run into a problem where you've got spotters that are starting to do this for a job, and they don't have their FFCs in place, you place yourself in a difficult position, and there's a very real possibility that you can get fined, and or even worse, that you lose your commission. So I think it's important. I think I couldn't agree with you more. That spotters, unless it's a once-off thing, it's going to be difficult to prove, but I think sooner or later it's going to go, because you're dealing with people out there that are trying to get the best buck for what they're doing, and obviously the sellers also don't want to be embroiled in that sort of thing, and you don't want to have a situation where your transaction is stopped due to the fact that there are problems with regard to spotters not being compliant. But as I say, it's a discussion for a different day. Any other questions?
Yes.
No, Sonia, I can't hear you. You're going to have to speak into the mic.
Hi, Nico. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
So I see on the chat group, Donnie has put on the chat. Let's assume you are registered as an auctioneer and an estate and an agent with PPRA.
Yes.
Can you sign a sole and exclusive mandate for 3 months to do your auction as auctioneer, and then further in the same sole and exclusive mandate extend the sole and exclusive mandate for another 3 months to sell the property as agent?
I think it's possible, but my feeling would be that you should do two different mandates, because your FFCs, you're going to have 2 different FFCs, and that's an interesting question. I just don't want to muddy the waters. I would personally do 2 mandates. That's what I would do. But you could have 1 document with 2 mandates in. I suppose that's. But you just have to split it to make sure that the different FFCs are applicable, because your FFCs aren't the same. Your FFC number is going to be different. So you're getting a mandate in terms of the Property Practitioners Act as a real estate agent, and you're getting a mandate in terms of Regulation 22, which are 2 different mandates which you have to differentiate with 2 FFC numbers. Can it be in 1 document? I don't see why it can't be, but you'll have to differentiate it in the document. That's my opinion. I can have a look at it, but it's an interesting question. I don't think it would be a problem if it's set aside, if it's made into 2 different documents in 1 document, 2 different sections. In other words, what he's saying is we can do both. We can do this and we can do that. Bearing in mind that we did, Sonia and I, as we've discussed earlier, managed to get the definition of auctioneer out there. And if it's an invitation to submit offers, it will still fall under your FFC as auctioneer.
especially when there are any competing bids. When you're selling out of hand, that's a different scenario altogether. Then you need your FFC as property practitioner real estate. But I think it's possible. That's my final answer. I'll take the money. Thanks.
Nico, and then Sulet said, do previous mandates fall away if it's a legal sale, insolvency, instruction received from the bank or creator?
So the instruction has so what they say do so well. That's where the Insolvency Act comes in. I mean, they can decide whether they're going to go on with that sale or cancel it in terms of the Insolvency Act. That we all know. And then if it's cancelled, then their fight is with the liquidator, not with the auctioneer, and you get a new mandate in terms of you get a new mandate from the insolvency practitioner. But your problem with the business rescue practitioner scenario that we had was under business rescue, and the mandate had been given. I think that the court, it would have been an interesting court case, but I wouldn't have wanted to be embroiled in that court case because it would have been very, very expensive and very, very time consuming. So that's why I thought that it was important to make sure that. But to answer her question, I think it's important that previous mandates will only fall away if the liquidator and or the trustee in the insolvent estate deals with it and decides, look, if there's a previous deal and it's a good deal, what's the liquidator going to do? He's either going to accept it or he's going to cancel it. That's where we are. And that pertains to the Insolvency Act. And if he cancels it, then obviously the previous mandate and deal falls away, and he'll give a new mandate. But that won't be the auctioneer property practitioner's problem. That'll be the insolvency practitioner's problem. But it won't be a problem because they've cancelled it. So they deal with that normally. I hope that answers the question.
Then we've got Jackie that said, in the end, it is your company name involved and reputation. So that's just a comment from her side. Bonnie, is there a cost per FFC held or one cost no matter how many you have?
For every single, you can answer that question, Sonia.
Yes, so for every FFC, there is a fee, and for every registration as a property practitioner with the PPRA, there will be a registration fee.
Correct.
Jackie,
that's a wonderful way of making money.
Yes.
We all know that.
And that is why they've introduced all the subsectors and categories under property practitioners.
Exactly.
And that is also why we went to the PPRA to get the definition of an auctioneer reworded or
well defined. We've got a proper definition now. Yes. Because as we said earlier, the problem was that we want continuance when it comes to a mandate, and they ask you to start selling and to start marketing the property, and then the way to get around that is an invitation to submit offers or tender, so that you can get a general feeling of where you're going with this thing. Because shortly after that, normally in the course of the liquidation business, especially, the liquidator will come back and say, listen, I want you to proceed to go to auction now, and he'd like to hear feedback. So then you'll be able to tell him, oh, we've done this and that and that and that, and yes, there's a lot of interest, or there isn't a lot of interest, or whatever the case may be, so that they can make a proper decision, and you can give a good service as an auctioneer. And I think that definition goes a long way to have sorted out those problems. Well done, Sonia.
No, it wasn't just me. Just to get back to Bonnie's question as well, with regards to FFCs, if you have more than one FFC as a estate agent or auctioneer, or what other subcategory under the property practitioners may fall, everything will be double. So you'll have to pay double fees, or fees for each category as property practitioner that you register under. You'll have to do CPD points under each category that you are registered as a property practitioner. You'll have to have a trust account for each. So all of that, for each category, the requirements will be applicable.
Correct.
Okay, then Jackie also mentioned, I would say yes, as the agreement will be signed by a different person instead of seller. Okay, so that are all the comments on the chat group. I just quickly want to see if there are any hands. Is there any other questions that somebody has? Or
I have a question, Sonia. I don't know. My question is to all the auctioneers out there listening to this short webinar. Have any of you ever experienced a problem like this with previous mandates, or run into a problem where there are mandates that have already been sold, mandates that had already been signed? Have you guys had any problems like that in the past or not? Is there anyone that has actually run into a problem like that? I take that it's going to happen in the future even more, but I'm asking now in the latest while, in the last while.
Nico, I know there was one of our members that did have an issue, and they're actually on this chat groups or on this webinar. So if they are comfortable sharing it, I would like to open the door for them.
Sharing is caring.
I see a comment from Jackie. Now we check the property portals to make sure there is no one else advertising.
Yeah, that is one way of looking at it. That is one way of looking at it. But how do you know if they've got a sole mandate or exclusive mandate? Unless they advertise it, they have to advertise it, obviously. But do they always advertise it? Mostly, yeah, I suppose. That's another way of looking at it, I suppose. But yeah, I think it's just easier to put that into your and to also discuss this with the and then if there is one, then you can cancel it. I think that's where we're going with this whole thing. Yeah, that's what I have to say. I don't think there's anything else to add on to that.
Okay, Jackie says it will say it as per sole mandate agreement.
Yes. No, that's what I just worked out myself. Yeah.
No, sorry, Nico and Jackie, just to add to that, because if you have a sole and exclusive mandate, anybody else advertising the property, even its open mandate, need to take off the ad.
Correct.
Because you've got exclusive, and that's a quick way of checking if it's right or not.
That is a quick way of doing it. But I say that in any case, when you're doing your mandate, you don't always have that available, and it may be necessary to just bring that clause in as a second. But yes, that I take your point, and I agree. That's a valid point. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Sonia?
I don't see any other comments on the chat, and I don't see hands.
Okay, well, in that case, I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful weekend. It's still raining here in the Free State. I don't know if it's raining in your part of the world, but have a wonderful weekend, and good luck with all your businesses. I hope it goes very well with you all, and I hope that this webinar means something to you. If there are any, what's the maximum time of a sole mandate? Maximum time of a sole mandate is 24 months in terms of the CPA. Can't be longer than 24 months, and you can't extend it longer than 24 months. In total, it has to be not longer than 24 months in total. Yeah, that is, I hope that answers your question. All right. Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you, Nico. It was very informative. Thank you for our members for joining. If you've got any questions afterwards, please feel free to send me a mail. I can forward it on to Nico, and we will get it answered for you. We will be sharing the recording of the webinar afterwards, and Nico's notes as well. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
joining and have a good weekend.
Thank you, Sonia. Appreciate it. Have a fantastic weekend to all. Thank you. Bye.